Revolution Radio.
Good evening, good evening, good evening. This is the Unequivocal Truth with your host, me, John Wayne. And I've got a very good broadcast set up for you out there listening tonight across the airwaves, the bandwidth, and the ether. I've got Gil Brassard with me tonight, and Gil Brassard is a science-based researcher, amateur astronomer, and theologian who has found new evidence based on Asian historical records, Chinese, Korean, and Japanese of the Asian area, of a planetary body. This provides the data points he has plugged into NASA's type astronomy software that utilizes Kepler's laws of planetary motion. The equations show that the data is from a real object approximately 2 to 7 times the size of the Earth on an elliptical path, averaging a yearly orbit closer to 360 years rather than the typical stated 3,600 years of Planet X. Gil has been able to link biblical eyewitness accounts and other historical records to the passing of this object through our solar system. Evidence suggests that in the most cases, the passage of this object through our solar system has less than catastrophic impacts relative to the Noah's flood incident, with records of geological data supporting increased earthquake events and volcanic activity, related methane releases with birds, fish, and insects' death being notably affected. Additionally, a period of extreme weather events will affect food production, as it has been identified in the past events. The most noticeable will be the 3.5 years before Planet 7X arrives and the 3.5 years after the Planet 7X departs. Planet 7X's calculated projected path not only supports publications of its location when having been found, but projects a mathematically science-based timeline that matches biblical prophecy and records to such a significant degree of accuracy that it is considered solid, revealing modeled data facts as prophesied. It is prophesied that the truth will be known in these days after more than 25 years of a massive effort to keep silent not only the timeline of its coming, but any attempt to undermine energy tax-based profits that have been a source of economically fueling the construction of underground facilities and other preparations. The Bible tells us of an impending economic collapse, massive, fatal, possibly man-made epidemics, famine, and war, and much more. Are citizens to believe that the same people and institutions that have secretly taken money to build underground hideaways, killing countless and millions to maintain their secrecy and to promote their agendas, have any vested interest in keeping the population alive past the point of economic collapse? Well, scriptures suggest not. And with that introduction, welcome, Gil. Welcome to the Unequivocal Truth.
Well, thank you, John. Pleasure to be with you.
Absolutely. You know, trying to think of where to run away here with all this, because, I mean, you have got an absolutely massive amount of data that you put together on this, and your work is expert to none that I've ever seen. You are absolutely the foremost front runner in the research into this topic.
Well, thank you for the compliment. I'm probably the only one that brought actually hard evidence from white paper research and actually ancient artifacts that shows astronomy. That it gives us the exact dates that certain events actually happen within 2 hours of the actual event, and we can get into those details later as far as how accurate it is.
Absolutely. So, you know, I guess starting off from times in biblical literature where this has made its passing, or, you know, the planet of the crossing, Planet 7X, what would be the timelines that we've looked at from past events up to our current day and age where we have seen this and the most notable events that have been witnessed by mankind?
Okay. The most notable it has is probably Noah's flood, and then probably Joseph of Egypt, the Exodus, um, Job's trouble. You probably heard in the Bible where the shadow went backwards for Hezekiah,
Mm-hmm.
right? And then we're dealing. Also, it goes with the sacrifice of Yeshua or Jesus on the cross, where we had 3 hours of darkness. It was there too, and then scientifically in 1054, with the Asian astronomers documented it quite well. It was documented by the Asian astronomers in China, Korea, and Japan when it passed in 1054, and that's where with their data we're able to correlate a entry and exit point, a elliptical orbit that confirms the 150-day separation of entry and exit throughout the biblical stories, like in Noah's flood in the book of Revelation. Both talk about 150 days with a basically a double meteor shower that it causes. So
No, with the double meteor shower and then the impending approach of this astronomical body, what would people most aptly have to prepare for in such an event?
in the past, it has a proven record of causing roughly 7 years of. It's a graduated famine where it gets very severe, right in the center of it, But of a total of 7 years, it has 3.5 years coming in, and as it orbits the sun, and it gives you another 3.5 years of famine as it's leaving, giving you a total of 7. And the most severe is towards the last 3 or towards the mid. So it appears that the globe is in that phase. That's one of the hallmarks that we're looking for, that gives us an indication that this planet is close. It's approaching us.
And it looks like we're getting them indications, not only from your bio there of the tectonic activity that's taken place, the absolute massive increase of volcanism, and now we are seeing a reduction in the ability to grow and maintain crops due to natural or, could be man-made disasters. And, us talking on air before the broadcast, folks out there, I think it's imperative that you're aware that the corn production in the United States is 33% in decline compared to what it was last year. So all of this is coming to pass.
Yep, those are the figures that within the last week or so that the government released, that we will have a shortage. It's coming up. Keep in mind that America overproduces their own needs, that a lot of this is shipped overseas.
Mm-hmm.
But it's going to cause food prices to go up, even though we may still have corn and everything else here locally, but it's going to cause food prices to go up, because there's certain countries that they're looking at 50% to 75% of their crops are gone, whether through flood, hail, early snow, late and the late season. You have a short growing growing season, and with the massive floods that they're having and everything, this affects the farming farming community severely.
Absolutely. So with this thing coming inbound, and governments preparing all around the world for this because they believe that they're going to ride this out in their underground bunkers. I've always said that these people who think they're going to ride this out in the ground in, these converted missile silos and other elaborate complexes are going to turn into nothing more than fossils in the ground.
Yeah, the Bible, the people are not thinking big enough when it comes to this particular event. This is what shifted continents in the past. This is what made mountain ranges. Tidal waves like we've never seen before as far as the heights. Matter of fact, the Bible warns us not to live anywhere along the coastline globally. Matter of fact, it even states that on the second event, which is 150 days later, a fiery mountain, that means one of the meteors is going to be the size of a mountain that hits Earth. That's wormwood. And it hits Earth so hard that Earth wobbles like a drunkard. Now that's a view from space, okay.
Mm-hmm.
And it even goes further, like a hut in the wind. It moves. Well, we're pushed slightly closer to Earth, to the sun, where this is where Enoch's calendar comes into play, a 364-day year. And remember, Enoch's calendar was written before the flood. But he was given 7 visions of the future, and he writes about them. That's the way he starts off his book, that Father in heaven had given him 7 visions, and the whole book is futuristic. Well, we have hard evidence through over 30 different civilizations that the calendar prior to the time of 700, roughly around 700 BC or so, calendars before that time was 360-day year. Not until the time of Hezekiah, which the exact date is 687 when it happened, because we have some artifacts that gives us the date, that the calendar actually changed globally for 365 and a quarter day. Earth's orbit around the sun was slightly larger. The planet passed so close to us, its gravity pull, its magnetic pull pulled us to a slightly larger orbit where we go around the sun. That now it's 365, because we have like over 30 different calendars. That their calendars had to change within the next 5 years, because they're already a week off per every year. So after 4 to 5 years pass, you're a month off on your growing season and harvest and stuff. Well, civilizations can die if they don't have that right. So they had to end up changing their calendar within the next 5 years globally. And but there's never been recorded anywhere in history of a 364-day year calendar except in the book of Enoch, but it was not pertaining to his time frame. It was pertaining to a future time frame. What's interesting, the Bible tells us that from the first event, which happens in March, that by the time the rapture comes around, it says it's 1,260 days before that event occurs. Well, and then he has a promise that he will shorten time. Well, how is it that you can shorten time, but you give us the exact days? He didn't. He's not changing the numbers. So how did he shorten time? Maybe because the year is 364-day year.
Hmm.
That happens on the second event. Therefore, your year is actually shorter, but it's still 1,260-day event. So on that event, it talks about every wall on Earth is cracked or crumbled from the impact of this fiery mountain that hits Earth. Every wall on Earth, according to my calcs, that's a minimum of a magnitude 14. That has never been recorded anywhere. I mean, magnitude 10 has not been witnessed by humans supposedly, and this is going to be
Absolutely.
closer to a 14.
And something of that size, I mean, not only to literally shake the earth in such a massive way, but I've been doing a lot of study lately into the super volcanoes all around the globe. If something hits the earth like that, I would imagine that there would be quite a few massive super volcanoes become uncorked, so to say.
Well, it actually gives us the area that it's going to hit. It says it's going to hit one of our oceans. Well, it's either the Atlantic or the Pacific or Indian Ocean, something like that.
Hmm.
But if you read the rest of the text, it things are still functioning in the Middle East region. So it's probably going to be the Pacific. And if it hits the Ring of Fire, that's like a pop-off valve, I call that, a pressure relief valve.
Hmm.
And if it hits it with, if it's big enough and it hits that, it will press that plate down. And a lot of the volcanoes all around that Ring of Fire is going to go off. As a matter of fact, that's how Earth got cracked to start out with. Was during the greatest impact during Noah's time was the Gulf of Mexico. That is an impact crater. It has all the signatures. But the reason why scientists reject that being a meteor crater is for one reason, that it creates too much heat for life to exist on Earth. That there's two waves of energy. One is the explosion itself. Then there's a frequency of energy that goes out like a pressure wave.
Hmm.
That causes carbon molecules to violently spontaneous combust. So all life forms, insects, birds, animals, humans, plant life, anything with carbon, you see a ring of fire that goes all the way around Earth, and you have nothing but a burnout cinder. So that's the reason why they reject the Gulf of Mexico as a impact crater. It's only because their physics is not working out. But like I told someone, I said, water is a good absorber of heat. He said, yes, it is. I said, wouldn't the volume of two oceans be enough to quench that heat issue? Because this was done in the second event of Noah, after the earth was flooded. And this knocked off 71% of our crust on the opposite side of Earth. That's the exact volume of our moon. I can't find an actual artifact that's dated that shows the moon beyond the time period of a stela pertaining to that shows Nimrod on the Tower of Babel. It shows it as a circle. And I have not found an artifact that dates back later than that. And we definitely have a issue with a planet coming in. It's affecting all of our planets. It's not just Earth which is affected. All of our planets are showing effects. Our volcanic activity and our earthquake activity are showing exponential growth. And that's one of the things that the Bible talks about. It says when you see earthquakes rising like the pains of a woman giving birth, know that it is near. Well, we're seeing this extreme, and it's getting even this next year. I mean, if I have an estimate on where I think it might come, because the Bible gives us even more information to look for. It says the moon has to be at the foot of Virgo. This is in the nighttime skies, not the daytime. And 2016 was one of them, and now 2021 is the other one. So we need to be, like the Bible says, watchmen on the wall. Everybody has a duty to themselves and their family to pay attention to the skies around Sagittarius and Capricorn, and look for probably a comet-like object. And it won't look big in the sky. It's going to look like it's harmless. It's going to look like any other comet, but it's going to have a long tail. And it's going to get progressively brighter as it gets closer. And the Asian astronomers saw it for 13 months before it arrived. That's with no telescope light pollution today. So probably closer to 6 to 9 months before it arrives. But pay attention to those skies. It has to be on the ecliptic. It's not at the south pole like some of these people are talking about, because it can't create a double meteor shower for Earth. It has to be on Earth's ecliptic plane, the same plane as Earth, for that to occur.
And you made a very interesting point that when the Sodom and Gomorrah, the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah would have been when the passing of this had occurred around that time, correct?
Right. They actually found the old city. It's on the north side of the Dead Sea. Pottery shards are turned to glass. Clay is turned to a different color because of the high heat. They even found trinidite there. Trinidite is usually found naturally where there's a nuclear explosion, because it takes the sand and turns it to glass. Well, they found trinidite there. It wasn't a nuclear explosion. This was a comet or meteor that exploded over. It has the same heat as a nuclear explosion. And the buildings are pushed away. The buildings are pushed off their foundation. It took a very immense explosion. They found body parts thrown around, proving that there was an explosion. Limbs are torn off of their body, and parts of it has been burned on their body after been torn. And just like the Bible describes. They even found 2 homosexuals sleeping together. They found the skeletons of them there. First time that archaeologists ever found that.
Interesting.
So these are eyewitness accounts. People have dismissed the Bible as stories, when actually these are eyewitness accounts. Because if it was made up, how did they get orbital mechanics correct? How did they get the effects of people vaporizing, like in Lot's wife? Her shadow was left on the stone. Okay, it's man's description saying, "Oh, she was turned to stone," because the Almighty didn't say that. She said He told him not to turn back and look. And because there was 2 cities being destroyed, she turned back because she had still some of her daughters that stayed behind. And when the second explosion happened, it vaporized them. You can see the same effects in Nagasaki, in Japan, where people's shadows were left on stone. So how would an ancient man try to describe that? They didn't have a word for vaporization.
Absolutely. I also come across a story today that I was reading talking about the Yucatan Peninsula, this asteroid we were talking about a few minutes ago, or a couple of minutes ago. And they were saying that they've actually found the same burned images of plant material and, I guess, quote unquote, the dinosaurs as well from that explosion.
You see, there's a lady from the Smithsonian Institute. She put an international team together. and she studied that region. Chicxulub happened too early, and it was a much bigger event. Dinosaurs, according to this international team of scientists that took 1 year to study samples in the region. So they don't have the event that actually killed the dinosaurs because they're not recognizing the Gulf of Mexico as being the largest event. Chicxulub is too small, and it came too early. It has nothing to do with the dinosaurs. Ms. Ixon, it was a local event, but it wasn't a global event. So that's the latest findings, and she almost lost her job for publishing that. We had talked to her about her findings, and she said, it damaged her career to print the truth. She wished she never published, even though it was an international team that agreed on the findings. But because she worked for this institute, and that it goes against the orthodox of science, and it goes against the norm, she was ridiculed, even though her work is solid. The team's work is solid, not just hers, but the whole team work is solid. So,
and they don't want the truth to get out there, and they've tried to keep everybody in the dark for so long because it's detrimental to the system that they have set up for the pillaging of the coffers, so to say, to make money on all of this fallacy of the way that they have energy and so on and so forth. And, we're come to this point now where, and I've said before, and I know that you would agree with me on this, that there have been past great civilizations that have existed, and they've been completely wiped off the face of the earth.
Yep.
And there's so many people out there that scoff of such things. But, I guess what I could say to them people out there that say, oh, this will never happen. There's no such way. No, never, ever. This is ever going to happen again. Well, when you see it in the sky, I want you to tell me the same thing again. These people who scoff at such an idea. Because, what we're trying to do is we're trying to inform people because the hour is dire, the time is late. And we are going to come through this same situation that past civilizations have before.
Well, I had started this as a skeptic about this so-called planet. And not until I found white paper, peer-reviewed these reports that talk about this new object in 1054. And here's this is from the Dublin Institute of Advanced Studies. It's called the Reevaluation of East and Western Records of the Supernova 1054. This proves the supernova actually happened a couple months earlier. That this part of the records is an object that they saw for 13 months coming in and 13 months leave, a total of 26 months. That's not a typical comet. You can't, that has to be a planet-sized comet to be able to reflect light at that far away for that length of time, and they give enough detail. And this is from, remember, this is the emperor's astronomers. Each emperor may have maybe 20 astronomers. Well, the emperor of China, the emperor of Korea, and the emperor of Japan. That's about 60 astronomers, and they're the best in the country that are putting their heads on the block to write this information down. Because if you wrote anything wrong in the emperor's records, you and your family could be executed. Matter of fact, it's actually documented that one of the astronomers after a feast fell asleep at his post at night. And a guard saw him, and he reported him to the emperor. The next day, he lost his head. They're very serious about what they write. And if it would be wrong, then it would not prove out in the model. When you put astronomy software and you input the data, because we know where the palaces were. We know where the astronomers' observatory was. I drove by it over 50 times when I was in China for about a year. We know exactly where they were looking from. And they didn't have a telescope. This was naked eye observation. And we have more than one white paper report talking about this. Then you take modern white paper reports that goes back over the last 150 years, that our outer planets were being warped by unknown gravity. Then move forward another 25 or 75 years or so. You have white paper reports that says comets in our solar system are being warped by unknown gravity. And this is only in one region of space, Sagittarius. Okay.
We're having all kinds of rocks thrown at us right now.
Now, the white paper reports are stating that the asteroids in the vicinity of Earth's orbit are being warped by unknown gravity over the last 20 years or so. Now, once you start disturbing their orbits, guess what? They start to cross Earth's path. And that's why you see so many fireballs come in through Earth's atmosphere, because their orbits are being warped by something approaching us. You have all the hallmarks of an approaching planet.
Absolutely. And the vast majority of these fireballs, the experts don't notice them until they're already upon us. And, to tie into this as well, there's study being done on the Earth's magnetic fields. And the magnetic fields are being perturbed. And it can be seen. This is all literal documented happening.
There's white paper reports that document that Earth's magnetic field is racing 12 times its normal rate. Further north it's moving. If you know how to read the papers, you know what this is all correlated with the inbound planet. What affects a magnetic field? Another magnetic field. That's the only thing that does that.
Absolutely.
Whenever it gets coordinated with everything else. And that's also what's affecting our sun, and that in turn is warming up all of the planets. We're seeing effects on all of the planets. And the evidence is there. Now, whether or not you want to accept the evidence, this is bad news. But you either prepare for it or you don't. That's up to you. But the news of this information and the facts of it is not going to go away.
It's just going to persist, and it's going to get more and more and more. I've noticed something. Just pay attention to the moon and the sun, right? And it seems that they are moving more in the sky, from north to south than I have ever witnessed before. Sunrise, especially, I pay attention to sunrise, and it seems to be moving a lot quicker than it ever has before. And that's just noticing just by watching, and the same thing with the sun, with the moon as well. And this kind of goes back to saying, the Earth will wobble to like a drunkard.
Yeah, but that would be after Earth's being hit by that fiery mountain. So far, we have pretty good information as far as lasers and timing. That the moon has shown a greater increase in its elliptical orbit. It was slightly warped. That was one of the studies. After that, they went silent again. All right. Mm-hmm. You will not hear from professional astronomers that on the payroll of the government and universities, they will not talk about this. They're not allowed to. The only time that they're going to give you something is going to be misleading. Like this what they call it, Planet Nine from that university. That's when they first wrote the article, is 300 astronomical, no, 300 astronomical units away from Earth, and that this guy, that's a professor, asks for amateur astronomers to help him find it. That was laughable. If you knew anything about math, one astronomical unit is 93 million miles, and this is 300 astronomical units away. On its closest approach is 300. Well, he kind of modified his papers. Now he says it's 200 astronomical. Neptune is 30, and we can barely see it with a pretty large telescope.
Mm-hmm.
So he modified it to 2. You still can't see that with an amateur astronomer's telescope. Can't see it that far. So what are they trying to pull? Is this guy really that? Is he incompetent, or is it just, or is he getting paid to say this, or what? But it doesn't add up. It doesn't. It just doesn't make a normal sense if you know the math and the capabilities.
Pulling the wool over the people's eyes and telling them to look, basically look over here to the right hand while the left hand does whatever over here on the other side.
Yep.
I guess uses now euphemism. And something that I was sitting here thinking about it. I forgot what the name of it was, but I pulled it up. And the analemma, the figure 8 that the sun makes in the sky. Has there been anything done recently within regards to the study of that, if it has changed significantly compared to what it usually does or has done throughout the past centuries?
I would only believe maybe a white paper report that was probably published before this event, and before this narrative, because information is purposely being skewed. Like they're not reporting all of the earthquakes anymore. And how do I know that? Well, I had a friend of mine. He was in Bulgaria, I believe it was, where he had I think a 4. It was a 4 on the Richter scale. And so he checked the USGS and they never showed it. So he called him. He says, look, I was over there. He says, they had a 4. How come you're not showing it on? Oh, because they didn't officially report it to us. He says, but you have seismic, indicators. No, we don't put it unless they misreport it. Okay. So even though their seismic thing records it, they don't put it on the tally. And if they tell political people to report only 1 in 10 or not as bad as that, but only 3/4 of the actual amount, then you don't get the full tally. The numbers are higher than what they're reporting. Remember when the FDI, the ag reports came out on after the flooding throughout the United States, and they virtually showed there was no change in food misproduction. The farmers even were laughing at this. Are you crazy? They were altering the numbers. Mm-hmm. They're going to show up towards the end of this year when the harvest starts happening. Just like I showed you, 33% was one of it. But it's so this is going to cause shortages to go to China and other places. You're going to see people starve because their countries cannot produce the volume of food for the population needs.
Absolutely. And it speaks of this, famines, earthquakes in diverse places, and pestilence and disease. We're seeing all kinds of pestilence and disease as well, massive outbreaks. here in the United States, and I can only begin to imagine what's happening worldwide and globally. But we're seeing all this. This is literally before our eyes, before our faces. And I guess it goes back to that old saying, is for those who have eyes to see and ears to hear, to take heed of the message of what is really happening and going on. I, I literally scream about this all the time, Gil, from the mountaintops. And one of the things I've been warning for the past 4 years is if you live anywhere near a coastline, you need to get the hell out of there because you will perish. I mean, there's
Yeah.
not no ifs, ands, or buts, but you will. I mean, I want people to be informed and I want them to be warned. Like you said, we're watchmen on the wall, we're blowing the trumpet. This is coming, so everybody wake up before it's too late. Now, with all of this happening, what would the things be that we could see to have happen during the actual crossing of this, besides the plasma ejections? And I want to get into that in some of the areas around the world where that's been, recorded and made note of, but also as well as you know the I'm trying to think how to put this. The well, I don't know. I mean, there's so much to go through. Let's start off with that, and then we'll get into some more, and we'll just keep moving along. So, with the plasma ejections that have been noted before, so you turned me on to this. I never ever heard of it before. Called the Eye of the Sahara. That's what they call it. It's got an actual name, and I think you'd probably call it faster than I would. But
I think it's
okay,
called a
and not only that.
Ricker's crater, but
Mhm.
it's easier to say the eye of the Sahara. It would if you go on Google Earth, it will come up, or
Yeah,
Google
the
it.
Riquette, something
Yeah,
like that. Yeah,
right.
and what I was thinking about, what I was wanting to get out there as well before my brain hit a wall. I wanted to talk about as well is the deviation of the Earth. Tilting 28 or 26 degrees. I can't remember what it was we talked about when we first were discussing this, but I'll turn it all back over to you. Go ahead, Bill.
Okay, we have documented evidence, which is in astronomy, of ancient artifacts. Whenever we analyze it, you couldn't see certain constellations at certain latitudes at the time that the artifact is dated in the region that it was given, unless Earth tilted 26 to 28 degrees. This was during the time of Joseph of Egypt. Remember, Joseph had a dream. He said the stars, the sun, moon, and stars bowed to him. Well, I have a problem with that. If the sun is doing the actual, because the word sun in Greek was helios, that meant illuminated object. If it was the sun out, how do you see the stars? Okay, so it's another illuminated object. Could be our planet, a comet. So the artifact shows that Earth tilted 26. It was an artifact made in Germany. Mined all of the materials were mined in Germany, and it was made. And it shows this star pattern, and it shows the eclipse that is happening. And Earth tilted 26 to 28 degrees. Well, from Egypt, what would that show as far as the viewpoint of someone on Earth looking at the stars? It would look like the sky is bowing to him. Literally. Remember, his dream was at age 17, I think it was, and not until he was 40 in Egypt, which is mid of the drought, is when the planet passes. It passed so close to Earth, it's like two magnets passing close to each other. Opposite poles attract each other, and they tilt 26 to 28 degrees. As it's leaving, it starts to straighten up again. This also happened during the time of Hezekiah, um, where the sun went backwards on steps. It wasn't a sundial. In ancient Hebrew, it shows you steps. Well, if the steps are facing south and it's 10 steps, that means the shadow went backwards 26 to 28 degrees. It was a tilting of the Earth. Earth tilted 26 to 28 degrees again. And we have an artifact during the time of Jonah, when Jonah went to Nineveh, which was 40 days earlier. It gives us the exact date within 2 hours of him giving the war. And this gives us the point of perihelion. Now, how did he know that that was perihelion of this object, and it takes 40 days before it reaches Earth's orbit, which the software model shows us? That's impossible for them to guess. They didn't have Kepler's laws of planetary motion. And when uh, when when the two planets come close together, they're like capacitors, and you have 30-mile wide lightning bolts that jump from this planet to the next to Earth, and that's how that Richter crater, that eye of the Sahara, is 30 miles across. It's a plasma strike that that ate away 300 foot of the mountain range. It's a flat crater. If it'd be a meteor crater, it'd be concave. They recognize this as not being a meteor crater. So what type of crater is it if it's not a meteor crater? This is a plasma crater. You can see the multiple rings where, because lightning like that is a helical coil that spins like a tornado, and then you see these perfect rings in this stone that it carved out. And we have scientific evidence that this is factual, as far as planets, that the universe is uh, electrically charged and everything. The universe is electrical. The physicists had a bet with the astronomers when comet Siding Springs passed next to Mars that there would be a electrical discharge from the tail, because the tail of a comet is plasma, not ice particles. Well, the astronomers were holding to their theory that it's ice, that it's ice particles, and that there would be no charges, electrical charges. Well, they were misobserving it from NASA, and there's a 10-second delay. And when the electrical strike, the plasma discharge hit Mars, they didn't show the public. They pulled away, and it showed you a distant view where you couldn't see anything on it. But an amateur astronomer captured it. It lit up the entire planet of Mars like a light bulb, proving that the physicists are correct, that the universe is electrical. It's an electrical universe, and and that the tail of a comet is plasma. Well, this information proves out the story of Joshua's long day. Earth slowed down on Earth on its rotational spin within a 3-day period, to where it came to a stop, because Earth is entering the tail of the comet, because the tail of a comet points opposite of the sun, is pointing at Earth as they're approaching each other. This is going to happen again. You're going to have a 12-hour delay on Earth's rotation, and the impact zone will be the opposite side of Earth. This is a key factor. The physicists are more correct on the model of the universe than astronomers are.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. You're right. And I wanted to ask you about the 3 days of darkness detailed in biblical literature. Does this tie in to Planet 7X?
Yes, it does. Prior to the Exodus, it collided with a planet that was in between Mars and Jupiter. It was Ceres, and it totally annihilated that planet. It's now called the asteroid belt. Well, that slowed down the forward speed of our planet X here. by 1/20th of its normal speed.
Mm-hmm.
And then it came around the sun. Instead of having 3 hours of darkness, he had 3 days of darkness because it was traveling at 1/20th its normal speed. Remember, on Yeshua's sacrifice, he gave us 3 hours of darkness. Now, keep in mind, a normal eclipse is only 7.5 minutes. That's the maximum that it can last, because the rotation of Earth will spin out of the shadow of the moon. So the uh, maximum that a dark spot on Earth from an eclipse can happen is 7.5 minutes. But the Bible says the whole Earth went dark. Remember, they had trading ships that would go to Rome and different parts of the world, and they would come back and they would report, yeah, we had an eclipse on such and such day also, and it was for 3 hours. Scared everybody. It was a talk of, it was a talk of shipping. So this is Passover. The next thing you have to recognize, this is Passover, and that's a full moon. You can't have an eclipse during the full moon phase. It takes a new moon. Moon's on the wrong side of Earth to have a solar eclipse. And we have outside documents that's not biblical. It says the moon was blood red and the sun went dark. That's a double eclipse. Well, if you check the text of the Bible, it mentions a double eclipse multiple times. And a double eclipse is not in the natural unless you have a third object, a large object, another planet-sized object to cause a double eclipse. The data is there. Well, not you want to accept it, but the data is irrefutable in models. It works. They didn't have the science to fake it. They didn't have Kepler's laws of planetary motion. uh, Now, what's real interesting, at Yeshua's sacrifice, Jesus' sacrifice, okay, he comes back and he shows John, whose Hebrew name is Yochanan. He says, write what I tell you, and I'm going to show you, the future. And you write what you see. Well, this object has passed 5 other times since Yeshua's sacrifice, and he didn't write about those. Remember, it doesn't always pass close to Earth, but it does cause the droughts and the earthquakes and the terrible things. It just doesn't always pass. Doesn't always cause Earth to tilt. Doesn't doesn't always cause Earth to slow down. It's only when it's passing near. At least 2 to 3 times it did that before in the past. So it passed 5 other times that they don't even mention it, because he says, not until Israel is born in one day, when the nation is reestablished in one day, says that generation shall not die out before all is fulfilled. In this generation, he's telling us this planet is coming back. Mm-hmm. And this generation, by 2021, being there around 85 years old, the Holocaust generation. Because you got to be 12 years old to be accountable as a witness. So, 1948, if they were 12 to 2021, you're mid 85. By the time you get to the rapture event, they'll be around 90. Counting in Hebrew terms, they're 90. Because the Hebrew ages, they don't have a year 0. They're 1 year older in the biblical text than the way that we count today, because we add 0 to our ages. They didn't. 0 is only like 3 to 400 years ago was added to the records and counting. So, and then the data that's in the records, they tell us there's 2 meteor showers, 150 days apart. It says I'll turn day into night and night into day. Well, that's not an eclipse. Eclipse doesn't give you daylight at nighttime. That's talking about Earth slowing down on its axis by 12 hours. where noon is midnight and midnight is noon. It also says that every wall on earth is cracked or shattered. Well, that's more than just an earthquake. That's an impact.
Mm-hmm.
And he even describes it as a fiery mountain. There's multiple points that they cannot guess that accurate. That's impossible. Because he even tells you, that he will return mid of night, not midnight, because that night's going to be 12 hours longer. It's mid of a 24-hour night, and he returns in Jerusalem to pick up, to escort a remnant to a place of safety in the wilderness. It's not the rapture yet. This is a first taking away is only to the wilderness. 3.5 years later, it says all believers, the dead are first, then the living, and that's at the end of the Great Tribulation. There's two taking aways. One is to the wilderness, and one is to heaven, and they're 3.5 years apart. Um, like I said, there's too much detail. There's too much exact points that you can
You extrapolate all of it and tie it all together. I mean, this all makes
exactly
sense.
multiple
And
sciences. Yeah, multiple sciences.
absolutely, yeah. And that's one thing you were saying too. It's not just one strict set of sciences. It's multiple sciences put together to paint the bigger picture. Because, like you were saying, they don't want people to know this. And
Yeah.
people that actually start putting all of this together and looking at the bigger picture, and especially if you have all the puzzle pieces together and you are putting it together and you're telling people about it, well, they get freaked out, so to say, because they don't want to give anybody a forewarning about this. And
Right.
3.5 years ago, 3.5, 4 years ago, I had a guy on my broadcast, and he had contact with a guy who was very high up in the military chain of command, and they had a secret meeting where they had went to the Virginia mountains up in the Appalachians, and they got on a maglev train underground and traveled to the Ozarks in Missouri. The guy that he'd talked to that was in the military, and they had this big meeting saying, "Hey, this is what's happening. This is what we're going to see. This thing is coming." And they issued everybody a specific set of uniforms. And the specific set of uniforms was basically a UN uniform, a United Nations uniform. And
Mm-hmm.
once finished up with this interview, or not the interview, with this, this meeting they had, it scared him so much with what he had been told from the higher ups that he literally got out of the military, found a place of refuge, and went into hiding. And all of this is just confirming from shows I've done in the past, from that guy I just told you about, to what you're talking about, and knowing that there is something afoot that is going to happen. It's irrefutable. Research you've done and the study into this and how you put it together, it's so brilliantly put together that you can't just, turn your head and, shrug it off, say, oh, whatever. No, you can't do that because this is legitimate. And, I want to get into Sukkot and the time frame for when this is going to be making its pass, if we could.
We have an estimate. It doesn't mean it's going to be an actual. You have to have. We have to have. We have to verify this visually. There is
Mm-hmm.
no uh, valid sighting of our planet in the public realm. There's some in the government realm, in the Vatican realm, but there's nothing in the public realm that's valid at the moment on the sighting. We have all the effects. We can see the effects. We can measure the effects, and it's exponential in growth. We do have an approaching body. Now, before it ever gets to the point where amateur astronomers, there's about 2 to 3 million amateur astronomers globally, before it ever gets into our view to where we can alert the public, they will shut down the internet before that. And you probably have military in the streets for a different reason. It may be terrorism that they put them up there, but it won't be pertaining to the planet. But they'll have military in the streets for your protection against the so-called terrorist threat or whatever. That is there. And during martial law, if you state anything that causes a panic, you're arrested. That means mentioning this planet. So it's left up to each person. I show them how to look for this and where to look. Only look between Sagittarius and Capricorn on the ecliptic. It will look like a comet. It will not look threatening. Not until it comes to the last 40 days of its approach. The last 3 weeks, last 2 weeks mainly, the last 2 to 3 weeks of its approach is where it really gets big in the sky. Otherwise, it looks like it's going to be harmless. So look, this next year, look between beginning of March or the end of February, all the way to October 1st. If you see it, then you should be making your way to Jerusalem. Remember where the Bible in the book of Revelation it says, "Don't make your trip in the winter."
Mm-hmm.
Well, if you understand the Hebrew concept, because these are Hebrew authors, it wasn't originally written in Greek, and there's evidence to prove that.
Mm-hmm.
The Hebrews didn't have 4 seasons. Many civilizations didn't have 4 seasons. That's a Greek and Roman thing. Okay, they had 2 seasons: the wet and cold season and the warm and harvest season type. Okay, well, that shouldn't be winter there in the original text. It actually so winter would be for 3 to 4 months right there. Okay, nope. If it's written in Hebrew, that'd have been the last half of the year, and their year starts in around the end of March. March, April is when their year starts when the equinox comes around. So when you count 6 months from that, you're at Sukkot. It says don't make your trip beyond Sukkot to Jerusalem. Right? The reason for that, Israel's going to start to censor or to deny people coming in unless you're Jewish, unless you're following the feast, and that's what Sukkot is. It's one of the feasts, and that feast, it's a practice on being living in a tent, basically in a temporary shelter. You're supposed to have a tent and cot, sleeping bags, cooking things, how to live in a tent. That's what it trains you for. That's why he has it in the Bible. It trains you how to be on your own without depending upon the government, because the government cannot take care of everybody. They don't have enough money for that. So you get your own tent supplies and everything to be able, in case your home is damaged and everything, and you bring that with you to Jerusalem, because it requires you to be in Jerusalem to celebrate that, or to do that practice run. And then the planet will rise around 3.5 days after Passover. The 2 witnesses appear during Passover. 3.5 days after that, the moon is at the foot of Virgo, and that's when the planet arrives mid of night on a 12-hour delay in rotation, mid of that night in Jerusalem. Now that would be we're looking at possibly we have an estimate of March 30th to 31st of 2021, but that means you will see it for Sukkot of 2020 before Sukkot comes around, if you're paying attention. Because there'll be many distractions for you not to pay attention to the skies.
We're seeing a lot of that now.
Well, it's the going to get more severe.
Hmm.
So I hope people prepare because um, the Bible says this is the worst event in all of Earth's history. Noah's flood is not the worst. It says this next event is. You're fixing to live through a biblical moment of the worst event and the most significant event in the Bible. Are you ready?
Absolutely, you're right. And I mentioned this to you, and I think that you, if I recall correctly, you said that you weren't aware of the Deagle report, Degal.
No, I'm not.
And it states in the Deagle report that a lot of Western societies are going to have a massive decline in population. And the website's put together through intelligence agencies, the CIA, military contractors, and things of the such. And let me pull it up here so I can get exact figures correct. I've got it saved here. I just have to find it. There it is, Deagle. I'm going to find the country list. Here we are. Let's see the countries. There's countries. Let's just go to the United States because the United States is listed number one on this here. And it says here on the Deagle report, currently, year 2017, the population is 327 million people. Well, the forecast for 2025 is down to 100 million people. That means something's going to happen to a hell of a lot of people. You know what I mean? And this is all tying in with what you're bringing us tonight, and the information and the study of what you've partaken in your life to prove to be factual.
Keep in mind that America is in a better position than most other countries right now.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, outside the volcano and some of the big fault lines, but I'm saying food wise, security wise, uh, with our present president, he has created a firewall kind of around America um, to help this situation out tremendously. There are countries out there, um, not so much Europe, but other countries that they import up to 40 to 70% of their food.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
That's 40% of their population. They will not be able to support. They'll either have to migrate, or they die, or something. But you're looking at a lot of unrest in a lot of these countries. You're going to see public in the streets. Remember when you saw the what was it, Arab Spring in Egypt and Libya
Mm-hmm.
and all that? That was
Yep.
actually caused by a hike in food prices. The government did not subsidize the food because the food was the grains were going up so quickly. They were, politicians worked slowly. Well, that caused the riot. That's how that all started because it was food. They didn't have their subsidies that they needed to keep their because they eat a lot of bread and grain, and
Mm-hmm.
it was just too expensive for them. Yep. So I'm hoping
You
that
know,
we will see a blessing, financial blessing, before Thanksgiving comes around. There's a strong possibility that coming up.
you know, I've been thinking of that too, and I've heard the date of October 13th is a date that I've heard here recently coming up in several different areas.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
basically, what it was getting at was more or less like what is it called? It's called a jubilee. Is that when the all debt is erased?
Yeah.
I
Biblically,
believe.
there's on the 50th year. You're never supposed to have a contract beyond 7 years. If, if you couldn't, if you're still lingering paying for something, all debts are forgiven after 50 years. and the land is returned to the original owner. In other words, banks and people who have a mortgage on it can't keep it. It goes back to the original family land. Boy, that'd be nice if they did that today, but they don't.
Well, I mean, everything's to the point right now where we see, and we don't want to deviate too far from the topic at hand, but we see the crises, so to say, this debt bubble increasing to the point of it's it's going to pop. It's going to cease to exist. And I've said for a long time, this has gotten so far out of hand. I looked at a report today somewhere along the line. I think it was like $1.7 trillion is the current debt that the United States is in. Well, how about, just think of this. How about we take this big chalkboard that's been written on, 500,000 times with different numerical equations, and we just break out the thing called the big old eraser. We erase all this stuff off this board, get rid of all this nonsense, and start back over from square one. Because
Well, that would
obviously we
be,
didn't do it right
yeah.
the first time.
See, that would be nice, but you see, there's a lot of countries that has our treasury bills, has money that's keeping them alive. That's the U.S. dollar as far as them doing trade, and the global economy is anywhere between 200 to 300 trillion globally. To walk away from that, remember, would discredit America in a huge, huge way that people would have a problem ever trading with us again if we just did that. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Now, like Trump said, he has a plan. He says the debt can be paid off. So he's already been doing accounting. Okay. Let's say gold goes up to maybe 6,000. I don't think it'll go up more than 7, unless the war gets way out of hand. But if it's I would say 6 to 7 would be where the normal price of gold would be because it's being held back purposely. Well, that would increase our gold reserves value probably 7 to 8 trillion dollars worth. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Then he's audited parts of the military, parts of the Federal Reserve, parts of the banking. I think he's found close to 15 trillion that's in hidden accounts. It wasn't, that was not used properly. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Our total debt is closer to 100 trillion. If you take everything that the politicians robbed out of Social Security and everything else and everything all together and make it solvent again, looking at closer to 100 trillion that Trump has to come up with. And believe it or not, he can. Because the world system is getting away from fiat currency. They're going to go to asset-backed currency. And that asset is probably going to be mineral wealth of a nation. That includes oil, gold, anything within its borders. That means there's no private ownership, true ownership of minerals anymore. So I'm not exactly a good, thing. I don't think it's going to be totally as good as it's going to make it sound like. But the whole world is switching to this. Once they revalue these foreign currencies, that to bring them back to a level playing field, the reserve currencies that are in banks have to come back to the original owner. Each Federal Reserve in each one of these countries have foreign currencies, and a lot of these foreign banks have dollars in it. Well, these dollars are coming back, so that's around 15 to 20% of our dollars coming back, which is going to cause inflation. Maybe 200, 300% inflation. Remember what the Bible says, it takes you all day just to work for your food.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Trump is probably going to take control of the bank system and say you can't foreclose on anybody. He'll just freeze the assets as they are, and you'll be able to withdraw whatever you need for food. They'll probably give subsidies out for food for a short period of time. This is only until this money has come back. All of it has come back. He'll probably peg the dollar to gold to stop it from this inflation. But you're looking at still about 200 to 300% inflation before he stops it, because he needs the inflation now to pay off the debt. He could create enough money in the treasury that to where the books are balanced. He's not going to pay off the debt. He can pay off a percentage, but we'll have assets where the books show that we're clear of debt. Therefore, people now, when it comes back, your money is buying twice as much as what it's buying right now. And he will have to, as he makes the dollar continuously stronger in different periods, each time it'll probably double in strength. Remember, the dollar is only really worth 2 cents right now, maybe even less. So to get it to the full value, that's 50 times what it is right now in buying power. Well, you can't do that all at once. People would benefit with the money being 2 to 3 times stronger than what it is now. Mm-hmm. So, but there's going to be a little pain to getting from point A to point B. So people need to have some food at home, have some cash at home, a certain amount. The banks won't go under. Trump will make it where the banks cannot foreclose on anybody during this time period, on this reset, because he's not going to bail out the banks. I mean, he's going to bail out the people if he needs to, but he's not going to bail out the banks anymore. So,
right. I want to most definitely get back into Plant 7X, and folks out there listening to the broadcast, you can find Gil's website at www.planet7x.net is Gil's website, and it has all the infographics there that he has put together and compiled for all of his research he's done. Yeah, and it's absolutely free, folks.
If you go down to the videos are not, but all the graphics and info stuff is free. You go down to about mid page, and you see a Google Drive link. And you click on that, and you can download all of the graphics for free.
I would implore people to go check this out, because you're going to get a lot more of the information that we can do just on verbal radio. I have never done video, and I don't ever plan on doing it, honestly. But the images are very well put together. All of the research is there. And, the things that we were talking about a little bit ago, I want to mention those, Gil, if we could. The Nebra Sky Disk, or, the Sky Disk of Nebra, which was created in Gosselies, Germany. That's what we were discussing a little bit ago. And as well as the Day of Jonah's 40-day warning. These are 2 infographics. Well, there's actually 4 of them in there, and we didn't get to the other ones here. Maybe we can get into that now with the time of Job's troubles that we have talked about that, and then near the time of Haji's warning to Judah. We didn't touch on that at all. Maybe we could get
what is Haji's? Hey guy.
Yeah. Hey guy. Yeah. Sorry, I pronounced it wrong. Yes, near the time of Haggai's warning to Judah, which would have been December 21st, 336 BCE.
Yeah, that one. We don't have an artifact on that one, but what this also proves out is the ages of the patriarchs. Or when I had difficulty finding a Bible that had that all this would line up with, and the one I found was the Leningrad Tanakh, or the Leningrad Codex, which is Leningrad, Russia, in their museum. And the patriarch ages are correct, and the scientific points are correct also. And the ages that they give line up with the astronomy of the artifact. It's all correlates. And this lines up with the astronomy and the Kepler's laws of planetary motion and the model that was created from in 1054 using the Asians' data, giving us the orbital path. All of this is correlating. That can't be an accident. That's impossible for them to do because they don't have the data or the science to make up a lie that can do that. And they talk about double eclipses. They talk about the sun going dark and the moon turning to blood red. And they're talking about droughts, great quakes, Earth slowing down. Extended days, meteor showers, you name it. The hallmarks are there.
Absolutely. Something I want to ask with the tetrad, the four blood moons that fell on Jewish holy days. Does that have anything to do with in correlation to Planet 7X by chance in any aspect?
Not direct correlation. I'm
Okay.
sure it's a sign that God is giving us, but usually it means possible war or something like that. Nothing happened. We've lost some of the interpretation on some of his heavenly signs. On which, remember, he said, the heavens that he created was to tell us the time, dates, and warnings. And
Mm-hmm.
whenever you go back and look at the skies of these certain events, like for Yeshua when he was sacrificed, and when Abraham was born, and it's phenomenal what the skies are telling us. It's absolutely phenomenal. There's a story to be told. Um, I don't go into that much detail, but because it's more the emphasis right now is more for people to get ready. There's something coming. It shows the sign. And the countries are gathering for war. Russia is, China is, Iran is, America is beefing up its defenses because it was aimed at us mostly.
Mm-hmm.
The Bible tells us the so-called peace agreements. It's not going to work out. It's going to happen. It'll probably start in the Middle East, but
We're seeing a. I'm sorry, I stepped on you. Go ahead.
I think a quarter of the world population, which is mostly Western nations, will be suffering terrorism within our borders. They've already planted the terrorists behind our lines, and I think that's going to start to shut down the economy. That's going to cause the military to come out because you're dealing with a paramilitary group of terrorists, and that will cause
Mm-hmm.
military to be on the streets.
No, you're absolutely right with that. And I mean, that's one thing I beat the drum pretty regularly on my broadcast is the fifth column element, which has infiltrated the United States. And to tie into that, somebody here, Grog, we've got a station chat room here. He posted a couple of videos with Dave Hodges saying the UN, there's been UN sightings, United Nations sightings from Illinois to California in 10 states to date. I mean, all of this is literally coming to a head. And at times it feels so futile, Gil, to try and warn, to try and wake people up, because it seems that a lot of people just aren't getting the message, or they're just taking the broadcast at face value for ear candy, for entertainment, to be, maybe spooked a little bit or something to that effect. But that's not what I'm going for. I'm going to try and wake people up and say, hey, like you said, the lateness of the hour is dire. And we continue to just beat this drum repeatedly from the mountaintop saying, hey, open your eyes. Because these are the times we're living in. This is what we are seeing. All great empires come to an end. And that old adage or that old saying, all roads lead to Rome. Well, it looks like the United States is literally on that road, walking the exact same path that the Roman Empire did. I mean, we're expanded beyond our bounds militarily, bases all over the world, and it just seems that we don't give a damn about our own country, is what it looks like to me. Look at the homeless in the street, the people who can barely get by day to day. And I sent you that video that I came across with that woman saying, "Well, we need to eat the babies. We need to eat the babies to keep the world spinning round and avoid climate catastrophe." Which, I mean, so asinine speak to me, but we come to the conclusion when we were talking just a little bit ago privately that in all ancient civilization collapse, they do revert to eating children and cannibalism. And it states it in biblical scripture. Those who, God forbid, those who give suck in those days, the days that we're getting into, because that's what ends up happening. I don't like to talk about the stuff all that much, but I mean, it's something I believe that heeds mentioning, because this is what is happening. We're seeing all this now before our eyes. And by God, I pray to God it doesn't ever get to that point.
Yeah.
Just will not be good. So I don't want to frighten everybody out there, but we want people to be awake and aware to what's happening, what's coming. And, Planet 7X, Planet of the Crossing. I mean, my God, it's got all kinds of names, doesn't it? You got Herculotus, Planet X, Nibiru, Wormwood, all these different things. It all ties into saying, hey, there's something out there, and it's on its way.
That's the reason why I stick with the scientific evidence and the something that we can correlate. People say, well, you use biblical. Yes, because it's scientifically correct, and I can prove it. You can't tell me there's no science in the Bible, because I can easily disprove that assumption. It is very correct. And there's no way that they could have guessed those details in the book of Revelation and let it follow a model. Because when we put this model into play, man, it's just it's jaw dropping on the details that they're giving us without software. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Without the prior knowledge of the science.
Absolutely, you're right. And thinking of this, I don't know if we discussed this when we've had our private conversations, but the Druids, uh, Stonehenge, and all these other ways for measuring the movements of the constellations and the summer and winter equinoxes. Um, I don't remember if we did or we might have, and I might have vaguely, forgot it. But there has to be tie-ins with all of these things, with such things as in being Stonehenge and these other henges and circular measurement devices, for lack of a better term, all around the globe, right?
Yeah, I mean, well, we found the oldest one in Germany. It's the oldest one in Europe, and these were ancient observatories. They didn't have a telescope. Okay, the observers at that time would observe uh, the positioning of the sun to where they knew exactly how many days a year was, and they knew X amount of days after equinox is when you put seed in the ground, the plant, and then there would also be the ones, because they were astronomers basically, that would that would be turned to, is this the planet of crossing? Is this planet X? Do we store up food because it's approaching? It would be a warning, uh, because they had certain data they were passing down. Um, This is why the emperors and the kings of certain civilizations all had astronomers. It wasn't because they were reading tea leaves of the king. Okay, it was to give them advance notice. Okay, we see it; it's approaching. Okay, right? He could take some of the money that they have and stock up on food for the royal household and his army. Okay,
Absolutely.
and if they
Yep.
were too late, they were overthrown. That's how come you see so many empires that are overthrown during this period of time. This is modern time. It's going to happen again. But
We're seeing it.
in the past, these astronomers warned the elite because they're the only ones that had money. This is happening right now. They're building these underground
Absolutely.
facilities not for the average person. It's for the
Not only
elite.
the underground facilities, but the observatories as well, like the Lucifer telescope there in Arizona, and other places around the world. These people at these facilities, they're warning the elite, saying, "Hey, this thing's coming. It's irrefutable." And we're seeing the same thing, like you just said, happening over and over again. Where look at Europe, for instance. Europe is in shambles right now. It's been overthrown by an invasion from the Middle East. Look at the United States. We're being invaded. They're here now, and now they're just waiting on the marching orders. We've seen this happen throughout millennia, time and time again, and by God, we're repeating the same cycle, and here we are now. And to throw out there as well, it's very interesting to note that the things that have been appearing in the rivers in Europe with the water levels receding in these rivers, things called hunger stones, where it says, they've got dates etched in these stones, and it says, if you're reading this, take heed that times are nigh and food will be short. We're coming into these times. It's irrefutable. It's all here. And like I said, it's there for those who have the eyes to see and the ears to hear.
The governments did a really good job of dumbing down the public. Now they don't have the ability or the discernment to analyze properly fact from fiction, and they're mostly ruled by their heart, you know. And
Mm-hmm.
and the Bible tells it gives a clear warning. Only a fool will follow his heart completely. You have to have some
Mm-hmm.
facts, some basis, especially if the Bible tells you to be at a certain place at a certain time, and then you overruling it with your heartfelt saying, "Well, if you die in this, and you're in front of the Father in heaven, you say, well, how come you didn't save me?" He says, how come you didn't listen to me? That's all he has to say, because he has it written what to do.
That's right. And, I feel sorry. I mean, I really do. I mean, I don't know if I should or if I shouldn't, but I do feel sorry for people out there who haven't come to Christ, who haven't found a true calling for spiritual redemption and saving their souls. But, then again, I don't feel sorry because it's all there. It's all there for people to literally pick up, read, and heed the warning and the message of the times we're currently in.
Let me, yeah. Let me give you a little accuracy here on how accurate the Bible is.
Okay.
Remember, Joseph was told to go fight an army 10 times his size. And exactly when he needed it, he asked the Almighty, give him an extra 12 hours to finish off the enemy. That's when the earth has slowed down, giving him the extra 12 hours. Just like Jonah, when he shows up in Nineveh, he makes a declaration, 40 days that your doom comes if you don't change, if you don't repent. And they did. But at the end of that 40 days was exactly when Hezekiah asked for a sign. Because he was granted 15 more years to live. He says, I want a sign to see if it's true. He says, move the shadow backwards on the steps. At the exact time, that's when the shadow went backwards on steps. Earth tilted 26 to 28 degrees. Now let's reverse. Now let's go forward into now. It says in the Bible that the two witnesses will show up for Passover. That's why people who practice Passover put an extra chair empty with a ready for Elijah to come in. That's going to happen on Passover. And Passover night is when it's a full moon. That gives you the exact day. Now, 3.5 days after that is when the planet crosses, and that's when Yeshua comes mid of night. That's the exact hour that he appears. And keep in mind, this is orchestrated with an orbit of a planet that's not stable. It varies 360 years, a little bit shorter than that, more, it varies. It passed 5 other times before since the book of Revelation was written over 2,000 years. They didn't mention one word of it because those were not important. So it's not until this one comes around. And then he makes the claim that this is going to be the worst event in all of Earth's history. Noah's flood is not the worst. This one is. How much more accurate can you get?
Absolutely. This time will be unlike any others that mankind has ever known and shall ever know. And it's interesting. The 40 days and 40 nights with Moses receiving the 10 commandments from the Lord. They wandered in the desert for 40 years. This number 40 comes up a lot in biblical scripture. I just figured I'd throw that out there. But, you're right. All of this is literally for people to see. And it is accurate. It's very accurate.
Well, if we take a parallel of one of the stories, right now we're in Jacob's trouble. The Bible calls this Jacob's trouble. And we go back and read the story of Jacob. Remember where he had to leave his home because he just got the inheritance and Esau felt cheated, even though he gave his rights away because he sold it with a bowl of porridge or whatever it was, bowl of beans or whatever. So he flees and he goes to his mother's uncle, whatever it was. And he strikes a deal to work for him for 7 years for his first wife. But then he didn't get the wife that he wanted. He was tricked. He was tricked and received a wife he knew nothing about, and he was deceived. Then he had to wait another 7 years. Well, this parallels the time that we're in right now. The globalists and Islam plotted against Jacob's seed in 2001. And 6 months later, they had the attack. Remember, Islamic and Jewish calendar starts around March or April. The year starts. So 6 months later is 9/11. Okay, that's CO1 and CO2 in the book of Revelation. 7 years later, we get a president, a world leader we know nothing about, and he tricks us. We thought he was going to go against the deep state and the Federal Reserve. He didn't do any of that. He ends up being a closet Muslim. 7 years later, we see now we have a jubilee that adds another. That's another high holiday a year. So that's actually 8 years. Now we have Trump, which is the leader that we always wanted, one who's going after the globalists, draining the swamp, getting rid of the debt. As a world leader, that's the one we wanted. Someone to do this. Now, you go back and read the story of Jacob. When he goes to leave his father-in-law, he leaves rich. The seed of Jacob and his seed is leaving rich because of the agreement he struck with his father. All the spotted sheep and animals were his. His father-in-law goes chase him down, and says, "Come on back to me. I need you." He turns to him, he says, I worked for you for 20 years. And now he's on his own before he crossed the Jordan. Well, what's 20 years from 2001, 2021?
Mm-hmm.
Well, we have the moon at the foot of Virgo again. That's only the second time it's happened. 2016 was one. That was a Jubilee. And now we have one coming up at the end of March, March 30th, 31st. Remember, we do not have a visual confirmation of this planet yet. I cannot tell you without 100, I can't give you absolute that it's going to happen because the Bible says you have to be a watchman. You have to verify it visually. So I'm giving you to start looking. If it's going to be that, it lines up with the story. We have an if, but we need a confirmation. And if you see it, then be in Jerusalem for Sukkot. Do not delay. Do not come after, because you won't. You probably very very few will make it in after. Uh, so that's part of his plan. That's why he tells you to practice these dry rehearsals. Now it's no longer going. Once the planet shows up in the sky, it's no longer a practice run. It's the real. It's the real thing.
Mm-hmm.
These are not vain religious acts he has us do. These are dry rehearsals that gets you in practice for the real event.
Mm-hmm. Is there any other safe places on the globe besides Jerusalem during this?
There will be pockets, but to know where they are is next to impossible. You want to try to be next to the pivot point of the tilt. When Earth tilts, you don't want to be 90 degrees from that pivot point because you're going to have 150 to 300-mile-an-hour winds. You're going to have tidal waves. You're going to have flooding in the northern southern hemisphere on the extreme ends of the northern sun. Water from the equator will gravitate to the north and the south when Earth stops on its axis for a while. You're going to have 60 to 160 foot of flooding in these super on the high north countries and the very high south ends of the poles. This is how the ice caps happen, where they shifted. Once you get water on them, they lift up, they float, and then when the water pulls out, it settles back down. It could settle back down on parts of Canada. The Iceland sheet could settle right, right where Canada is, and you'd have the ice. You'd have the ice age talked about again. These were ice sheets that moved. Remember when the mammoths froze to death?
Mm-hmm.
That the food in their mouth, they didn't have time to swallow the food that was in their mouth. They froze so quickly. They were caught in a tilt, and that was Arctic winds. They were moved further north. Arctic winds froze them. When you have Arctic winds at 200 miles an hour, you're flash frozen.
Absolutely. I saw a very well put together video discussing this, and it showed a map and the current movement of the poles, the magnetic north and south poles. They were showing that the northern ice caps are literally going to be situated pretty much more or less over the vast part of the United States continent from southwest United States on up into Canada and over through the Midwest, which is the grain belt of the world.
Well, unless the government's using the Bible, they don't actually know that yet. They don't know how close this planet is going. The Bible tells us this. The Bible tells us it'll come so close that it'll appear like it's going to have a head-on collision. But because of the new physics, that the tail of a comet is plasma, that will cause Earth's forward speed to slow down and our rotation to slow down. And they won't collide, but they'll come close enough where they tilt towards each other. Okay? And
That's why he's having you in Jerusalem. That's very close to the pivot point of the tilt. Okay. This is also the Antichrist false miracle. Remember, because of terrorism and CO4, they'll be shipping a lot of Muslims back to their country if they have a member that's actively being a terrorist. So then here comes the warning at the 40-day warning, that the target zone is that half of the earth, the Middle East area. Well, no one's going to issue them a passport because of the terrorist activity. So they're stuck in their country thinking that they're going to be wiped out. This is where their Mahdi, which is the Antichrist, will make a false miracle. He will claim that he will slow down the Earth's forward speed and cause its rotation to stop and cause fire to fall on their enemies. Well, I guess he read the Bible. The Bible tells you this. All right? And the Muslims will see him as saving their lives. You see? And this is the guy that gets the peace agreement signed, and he's going to be Muslim. Nimrod was the first man on earth to claim the earth as his own, like the Messiah. He was a grandson of Ham. That's considered the black race. You have Judaism and Islam that don't believe Yeshua is the Messiah. They believe that he's a prophet. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
And this Antichrist is going to, the Muslims believe, for him to accept him, his father has to be Muslim. And for the Jews to accept him, his mother has to be Jewish. Now, what political figure that's been a world leader at one time is black, like Nimrod, whose mother was Jewish and his father was Islamic? And that's going to probably be in the middle of this peace agreement coming up.
Old Barry Soetoro, Barack Hussein Obama.
That's the only one to me that kind of fits the category on the details. Didn't he finance ISIS? Got that all started?
Absolutely. Yep, he did.
What is ISIS? ISIS is the army of the Mahdi. Who sent money to Iran? The leaders of Iran are 12ers. You can look it up. 12ers. They're ushering in the Mahdi. That's their job. To start wars and usher in the Mahdi. 12. These are 12ers. Now, he didn't go to the peaceful Muslims. He went to the radical and gave money.
That's right.
Wake up.
He sure
Wake
did.
up, people. Wake up, people. It's closer than you think.
And I'd heard, you're right, and we're getting to the very end of the show here. 10 mouse here, 54, 55, about 3 minutes left. What is it? I wanted to throw something out there and make a point with this. It was going to tie right in there. But I guess it slipped out of the gray matter. I hate it when that happens. It's right there and it just goes away. Gil, your site again, www.planet7x.net, folks. Go there, check out the information, the infographics. And is there anything else, Gil, you want to leave with the listeners before we part ways on this broadcast?
You can go to YouTube on type in my channel, Planet 7X, and you can listen to past interviews. I'm going to have this one up later on when I put some graphics on it, and I'll make this one into a video. And thank you, John, for letting me do that.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, no problem at all. It's my pleasure. And I want to thank you very much for coming on with me and doing the 2-hour broadcast. And I know it's good radio when a 2-hour broadcast, it seems like we've just been sitting and chatting for maybe about 15 to 20 minutes. We literally burned through them 2 hours at light speed. Yeah. So, folks, Thank you very much for joining us tonight. And this is John Wayne with Gil Brassard signing off for the evening. Godspeed, God bless, and be in the right place when that time comes. And keep your eyes to the sky. Good night, everybody.